Pastor Dale probably came to me maybe December and was like, hey, I really would like you to speak. And I was like, in front of people, like from our church? And he was like, yeah. I was like, well, do you know who you're asking to speak? Like, I'm a very spicy person. Are you sure that you want to trust me with a microphone? He was like, yes. I said, okay. So my name is Shelby Barnhill. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I do medical type social work, and I also have a private practice that I function out of called Indigo Counseling out in North Little Rock, Arkansas. There's my face. I specialize in a magnitude of different things right now. My big thing is narcissistic abuse, domestic violence, and I also deal with child custody cases. I also deal with parent reunification. And then as far as working at Children's, I'm based out of the emergency department, and so I see a magnitude of all the things from abuse, child death, resources for communities and families and things like that. So I have a magnitude of experience working, again, with very different populations. So hopefully all the things that I talk about today will resonate with you guys. And of course, if y'all have questions about anything I'm saying, I'm open to you guys asking. I would actually prefer if you did, because then that means I don't have to talk. Okay, so we can go ahead and get started. So it's not a secret. There's obviously stigmas in the church whenever it comes to mental health. I am somebody who has been diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. That was actually a most recent diagnosis that I learned as far as the OCD, but I've kind of always learned that I've had complex PTSD due to childhood trauma. I actually had a gentleman earlier ask me, kind of what brought you to doing social work? Kind of what was your why behind that? My why behind it was, as a kid, having dealt with different varieties of child abuse, I didn't have anybody. Like, there was nobody in my small town that I could talk to, visit with, about what I was dealing with. And so I had always wanted to be that person that was somebody else's why, somebody else's, reason why to live, to ask questions, to, still be a part of their community. So a lot of times whenever we're dealing with anxiety, depression, the main stigma is if you have anxiety, you don't have enough faith. That's simply not true. I would probably, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this on TV or whatever, but I would say that's probably the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. I would also say, too, that whenever it comes to anxiety, depression, trauma, all the things, telling somebody maybe you should just pray about that more, I want to throw a brick at your face. Please don't ever say that to somebody. That's probably the most unhelpful thing known to mankind. So, but also mental health looks different for different people. Anxiety can range from minor anxiety to social anxiety to, you don't want to get out of your house. You don't want to go to work. You can't get out of the bed because you're super depressed. Suicidal ideation, all these things. And it's not because, you choose to have anxiety, right? Nobody chooses to have diabetes, right? Nobody chooses to have cancer. People don't choose to have trauma. People don't choose to have depression and anxiety. So it's not something that can just be fixed just like that. So we can go to the next slide. So what is mental health? Mental health is emotional well-being, psychological well-being, relational well-being, as well as spiritual well-being. I'm a nerd. Is anybody else in here a nerd? So I really like to learn about the brain. I want to know why I do what I do, why I think the way I think, what chemicals are happening in my body, why does my body respond the way that it does. So I put up some of the information just to kind of give some feedback on what that looks like. Maybe. There we go. Okay, so this is what happens in the brain whenever trauma happens, okay? So in our amygdala, the fear center, that sends the distress signals throughout the entire body. So obviously, everybody in the room has had fear, yes? Okay. So that chemical that happens whenever you're in a fear situation, that's coming from your amygdala. Your hippocampus is your memory and processing, which is the cause for your memories to be fragmented or emotionally intense. Has anybody in here ever had a super traumatic experience and you've tried to recall what actually happened and you're like, oh my gosh, I literally cannot? Right. That's part of your hippocampus because that's where your memory and things like that are housed. Your prefrontal cortex is your rational thinking. Obviously, that is decreasing whenever there is a situation that's happening, and we're shifting more towards a survival mechanism. So I know for me, whenever it comes to fight or flight methods, it's technically fight, flight, or fawn. Has anyone ever heard of those terms? I'm a fighter. I don't like to be scared. You might get punched in the face, so word to the wise. Don't do it. If you do, it's not my fault. But so whenever, you're having some type of trauma, it makes it really, really difficult to be able to think rationally whenever all of these hormones and all of these things that are happening in your brain are happening all at once. We can go to the next slide. So these are all of the hormones. So your cortisol is your stress hormone. I have been told up 10 times, Shelby, your cortisol levels are super high. Well, welcome to trauma. Your adrenaline. Right? So that creates the intense physical sensation. So that may be why, if you've ever been chased by a dog and maybe, you fell, but you don't remember or you don't feel like, oh my gosh, I actually broke my leg. Well, it's because you've got the adrenaline pumping through your body. It's not till your nervous system and your brain regulates itself enough to be like, oh, your leg is broken. Your norepinephrine is your consistency of on-edge feelings. Dopamine, the emotional numbness, and the addiction to vulnerability. And then the serotonin, which is our mood regulation. Okay, we can move on. Okay, so whenever I was thinking about this, actually, you guys can thank Jacob Perkins. I had reached out to some friends, was like, I don't know what the heck I'm going to speak on. And Jake was like, actually, I think you should do this. And I was like, cool. So last week came and I was like, oh my gosh, I actually don't know what I'm going to talk about. And then I remembered our conversation, so y'all can actually give kudos to Jacob because he's the reason why I'm talking on this subject now. So in thinking about scripture, just to kind of back this up, I'm reading out of John 5, verses 1 through 15. And is everybody familiar with the man at the well of Bethesda? Okay. So some of the notes that I had written down, and actually my dad pointed out a really cool thing so I had always read this scripture about this man as he was making excuses as to why he couldn't. And I was, I sent all my notes and stuff to my dad, and he was like, well, I don't know that I actually agree with that. And I was like, okay, well, what are your thoughts? He said, well, that wasn't his excuse, that was his reality. Like, he was actually disabled whenever the pool would get stirred up. It wasn't an excuse that he wasn't able to get into the water. It was his legitimate reality. He didn't have anybody to pick him up and put him in the well. And the people were actually getting down before him, so he wasn't able to be healed. So whenever we're looking at that, the man had been at that well for 38 years. To me, that's a really long time to just kind of be sitting somewhere waiting to be healed. That's 38 years of your life. And then on top of that, he was surrounded by other people with similar disabilities for 38 years. That's a really long time to be surrounded by people with the same types of disabilities, still having the same issues as you, as you're not able to get into the pool, or at least you're not the first to be able to get into the pool. So lo and behold, Jesus is walking through, and it said that in verse 5, it said, one man was there who had been disabled for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and realized he had already been there a long time, he said to him, do you want to get well? Sir, the disabled man answered, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, but while I'm coming, someone goes down ahead of me. Get up, Jesus told him, pick up your mat and walk. Instantly the man got well and picked up his mat and started to walk. So whenever I read that, it was like, okay, well, so if Jesus looks at this man and says, pick up your mat and walk, and he does, and there's healing, what exactly does that look like for the rest of us, right? So whenever Jesus asked, do you want to get well, his response was, that was his lived experience. His disability was his lived experience. The trauma, the anxiety, the depression, the complex PTSD, the porn addiction, whatever it may be, that is your lived experience. That is the view in which we have lived your life, right? Maybe your mental health issues, again, that's the only lens that you've ever been able to view yourself from. But if we were to be honest, if Jesus were to ever look at you and say, hey, I need you to pick up your mat and walk, would you do it? If you wouldn't do it, why? And, do you pick up your mat and do you walk, or do you sit in the dysfunction? Because let's be honest, sometimes sitting in our dysfunction is easier. We know the chaos, right? We're not a stranger to the chaos. But whenever the man picked up his mat, as Jesus asked him to do, and he took off walking, it says that he was healed. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He picked up his mat, he walked, he was healed. Sometimes it's easier to stay unhealed and stay in your struggle when your surroundings never change. If we're consistently doing this, I think it's they say it's the definition of insanity. Whenever we do the same things over and over and over again, expecting a different result, that's literally the definition of insanity. So one of the analogies that I try to use quite a bit is, does anybody know maybe an aunt or a grandma who just every year she does a really big meal, and it's awful, it's terrible? Does anybody have that? I do. I love her, but she's real bad. And every year it's like I sit at that table and I'm like, oh, she's gonna cook a great meal, and every year she in fact does not cook a great meal. But I do have an opportunity to grab a pizza before and just kind of move some food around, right? So it's the same in our mental health journey. We don't get to sit at a table every day and complain that we are not getting better whenever we're not utilizing tools that are potentially out there for us to use to get well if we're unable to move forward, right? So it's kind of silly if you think about it, of asking, hey, I want healing. But whenever you have, people like a therapist or a pastor or a friend or a mentor that has resources for you, and we're not actively going out and seeking those things, or we're unwilling to do so, but we're asking for healing, what does that mean for us? In looking up what Bethesda means, it means house of mercy. Mercy is showing compassion, forgiveness, kindness, or kindness to someone who is suffering, hurting, or deserving of punishment. How many times does the Lord grant us mercy and forgiveness, but we refuse to pick up our mats and walk? How many times has Jesus given us opportunities to be healed, but the barriers feel bigger than our boldness to step out and seek help? Jesus is full of compassion and mercy, but Jesus is also a gentleman. He's not going to force us to do anything that we don't want to do. So I was reading back in Revelation 3:20. It says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in." But that's a choice, right? Again, Jesus is a gentleman. So if Jesus is standing at the door and knocking, it's like you peek open the door and you're like, this is an area of my life I actually don't want you to touch. And we shut the door in his face, and we're still expecting him to heal the area that we're still not allowing him to touch. What does that look like? How many times does Jesus sit there and knock? He's going to, right? Because he's God. He cares about us. We're his children. He loves us, and he wants us to be healed. But how many times do we want to sit behind that door knowing that we need to change, knowing that there are resources available, but we're still unwilling to move? We can choose to get mental health help from therapists, pastors, and mentors. We choose to work with our doctors if medication is needed. We choose to make change even when it feels like our comfort levels are being violated. That's a really big thing that I will talk about a lot with my clients. And I think a lot of my clients would probably identify me as a very spicy therapist. I'm not your soft, mushy, gushy. Yes, we identify feelings. We talk about those things. Obviously, they're important. But my bigger thing is, let's address your main issue. And if you don't want to address your main issue, why? Let's talk about the barriers. Sometimes that's pride. I struggle with that. I don't know if anybody else in here does. Sometimes it's ego. Coming to therapy is stupid. Coming to therapy is for weak, whiny individuals who just want to pay somebody to listen to their problems, right? I've had clients say that to me. And I'm like, well, then you're making me rich, so I appreciate you being here. But again, we choose to make change even whenever our comfort levels are being violated. Trauma is never your fault. I just want to say that first and foremost. Trauma, the things that have happened to you, are never, ever, ever your fault. But the responsibility of healing your brain, healing your body, is absolutely your responsibility. 100%, right? And so, Jesus gives people certain sets of skills and certain talents and things like that to be able to give education and tools to work with people, to develop coping skills, to work with people on processing through their trauma. I know for me, I attend therapy every week. Actually, I was at my therapist today at 2 o'clock, and she's amazing, and I love her, and I appreciate her very much. Because there's a lot of times living in my brain can be overwhelming. I don't know if anybody else feels that way. So it's nice sometimes to kind of get it out and have somebody else look through what I've got going on in my brain and help me just kind of sort it out and figure it out. And also, I would consider it like a walking, talking diary. She literally tells nobody anything. So I can say all the things that I want, and it literally goes nowhere, which makes it even better. But whenever we're, going through these things, you have to be willing to accept the help, right? Can we move through, I think is it my next slide? I think. Nope, keep going. Past that. So I didn't actually know if I was allowed to say the word crap. I didn't know if that was appropriate for church. So I was like, is crap okay? But I guess it is, hopefully. Okay, great, because it's on there and y'all have all seen it now. So whenever it comes to, like I said, taking responsibility for yourself, you have to take accountability for your actions. Again, trauma is never your fault, ever. But you are responsible for how you treat people. You are responsible for your responses. You are responsible for how you show up in the world for your family, for yourself, for your spouse, for your colleagues. You have to answer for those things, and your trauma doesn't give you a pass. Utilize tools in your toolbox. If you don't have them, get some. Phone a friend. Find a therapist. If you don't want a therapist, find somebody who's smarter than you, who's lived a better life than you. And again, utilizing medication if we need to. Can we go to the next slide? Oh, okay, we can leave that right there for a second. The hardest part about mental health and working through that is the healing part, because healing requires a certain level of separation and sacrifice that most people do not want to go through. Separation can be sometimes separation from your friends, separation from your family, and at times, that can be separation from old habits and old addictions, things that you held near and dear. We call those maladaptive coping skills, things that are comfortable but not necessarily great for your day-to-day. Sacrificing of your comfort levels, sacrificing of your ego and your pride. But the other part is healing is hard, but it is needed. Healing from trauma can release your mind from bondage. Healing from trauma can also release you from physical symptoms. A lot of people don't know this, but whenever it comes to women more specifically, undiagnosed trauma, unprocessed trauma sometimes shows up as autoimmune disorders. Did anybody know that? So my mom, I don't know if they're in here, but my mom has a slew of different types of autoimmune disorders, and a lot of that was because for many, many years she did not go to counseling, she did not get therapy, she did not seek help. But now that she is, we can absolutely say that while she's not in full-blown remission from her autoimmune disorders, she is significantly better than she was, and a lot of science and data is coming out supporting that, more so for women, that whenever you have undiagnosed trauma for long periods of time due to increased cortisol, increased adrenaline, things like that, it literally stores itself in your body and it wreaks havoc on your body. Whenever, more just kind of education for my nerds in the room, whenever you're dealing with depression, there are your neurological pathways and things like that. They've been able to see them on MRIs, that whenever you have extensive depression, parts of that brain will go black on an MRI. Not because it's dead, but because it literally has to form new pathways to figure out how to transition thoughts and feelings, because that part of the brain is considered partially inactive. So just a fun fact for you guys. Healing allows you to see yourself in a new light. How many people in this room would love to not view themselves as damaged goods? Right? So being able to process your stuff, having somebody else be able to tell you, hey, maybe you're addicted to porn. I was a porn addict for 15 years. I was introduced at 9 years old, and I did not work through that. I didn't even know that that was a thing for women until I was actually here at New Life whenever I was in young adult ministry, whenever I first talked about my addiction, because I thought I was alone. Again, at the time, I thought that no women dealt with those types of things, but in fact, they do. And, I would be a liar if I said that at times there's no temptation, because that would be completely untrue. So there's things that I have to keep myself accountable for. But again, being able to talk about that and heal through that has been super helpful for me. Allowing yourself to receive mental and physical release in your body that feels extremely heavy can also relieve you of the physical symptoms. So anxiety, sometimes it's vomiting. People get super duper anxious and they start to vomit. They have physical, they have panic attacks. They will, some people have enuresis or encopresis, which is incontinence of your bowels. But in all of that, healing helps you. It breaks generational curses off of your family. I know that was one thing that I wished my parents had done before they ever had me, was work through their stuff. That's the best thing. I'm not a parent, but I obviously see a lot of kids and I see a lot of parents. If that's the one thing I could ever preach to parents, is heal your crap so your kids don't have to. That's the biggest thing. Because healing from generational trauma that wasn't meant for me is hard. It's very hard, and it's not fair to your kids. So heal for yourself, heal for your kids, heal for your family, heal for your spouse. They didn't sign up for that, right? And all that to say, part of this other part was compassion in Jesus. Jesus is so compassionate. He meets us where we are consistently. He never looks at us with disgust. He never looks at us with, oh my gosh, I can't believe I created this person to defile themselves or defile me the way they have. He is so compassionate that he continues to show up. He continues to meet us where we are. But Jesus desires wholly, not only the parts that look like we have it all together, but the whole person. And that is the compassion of Jesus. That is who he is. So all of that to say, Jesus left us with his Holy Spirit. That's one of our best counsels that we can absolutely have. Jesus left us his holy word. We literally have it at our discretion at any point in time. Get into it. I know I'm bad about it, so I'm literally preaching to the choir. Jesus offers compassion, and Jesus also sought wise counsel. That's the other big part, is if, we are too prideful to seek wise counsel, but Jesus Christ himself went to the Father to seek wise counsel. Why can't we? And, Jesus provides us with all the things we need to heal. We have to choose to accept the healing. So if you're unwilling to accept healing, don't get mad whenever your life never changes. Don't get upset whenever the same situations that continue to show up time and time again, they never go away. You're seeing the same behaviors. You're seeing the same results over and over and over again. But whenever you choose to step out of your own way, and whenever you choose to go seek help for whatever it is that you've got going on, that's whenever you start to see true change.